Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to a project management and change management collabs for awesome results. I'm just going to give everyone a minute or two to dial in and to settle into this broadcast. My name is Christina.charenkova, and I welcome you here. If you have just joined us or are in the process of joining us, please pop in where you're dialing in from in the chat and say hello to us. That'll be absolutely fantastic. And through this conversation, the idea is that it's a very inclusive and engaging conversation. So please, guys, if you have any questions, pop those down in the chat and we'll endeavor to go through these as we're talking. So here we go. Is this starting? Yes, we're starting. We're live with the first comment. So let's just wait for a few people to dial in. Hello from Seattle. Hello, good morning. I say good morning because I'm based in Australia, sunny Australia, as you can tell. And it's bright and early here in the morning. So I've got my beautiful cup of tea to say hello to people. Bonnie is dialing in. And it's the afternoon for her. So please grab a cup of tea or a drink of choice and join us for this conversation. Let's see where people are dialing in from and just say a few hellos. Anna, hello from Alberta in Calgary. Hello, Anna. We've got Canada. We've got UK. We've got Charlotte. We have got Melbourne. Hello, Melbourne.
Yeah.
Excellent. As people are dialing in, this is absolutely fantastic. It's so nice to have all of you here. And as you can see, like the LinkedIn community, the best thing about LinkedIn is it's so international and so inclusive, and we get to speak to so many different people from all over the world, and it's absolutely fantastic. Now, today we're talking about project management and change management collaborations. And I'm so thrilled to have Bonnie Beerford with me on this conversation. I will give Bonnie a chance to introduce herself in a minute. But let me just introduce myself in case you haven't come across me before. My name is Christina.charenkova, and I'm a business consultant and a change strategist. I thrive on change, people, culture, digital and tech transformations. And I do that because at the end of the day, we live in a change continuum. And if we know how to do change better, smarter, and can anticipate the journey ahead, then we are set up for awesome results. I do consulting, I do tailored workshops, coaching, and training, as well as I'm a LinkedIn learning instructor. And that's why I had the chance to meet my guest today, Bonnie Beerford. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bonnie. Bonnie is a well-known and loved LinkedIn learning instructor. Her course, Project Management Fundamentals, has been as part of the top 10, if not the top spot of the best courses on LinkedIn learning. So, Bonnie, welcome today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your experience.
Oh, sure. Well, thanks for inviting me. Actually, they changed the name of my course a while back. It's now Project Management Foundations. So just so that people don't get confused.
Thank you.
I don't think I didn't make it to the top spot either. I think I got to number 2 the first time, but it's been in the top 10 for more than 1
It
year.
has.
So
It
anyway.
definitely has. Yep.
So as way of introduction, we just wanted to tell a little story of, in a way, change. I started in college thinking I was going to do electrical engineering, and I did that for 2 years, and then went, no, this is not what I want to do. So then I changed and did a 180 degrees. I went to architecture, and I got a degree in architecture, but I still I'm really not an architect. So I I worked for a bit and to figure out what I wanted to do, and then I ended up getting a master's in structural engineering. So I like,
Wow.
and at this point, I don't use any of those things. Because the interesting thing was that pretty much from growing up, if I had really understood what project management was, like I mean, I'm just wired to be a project manager. So,
Mm.
um, I happened to discover it and went, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Um,
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, and this is the
so
funny
that's
thing about, I
that's
think,
my little,
qualifications sometimes, right?
yeah,
We go on the path to get qualified for something, and we think that's the thing we want, and we discover something new along the way, which is amazing.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, and so I've been doing, I've been a project manager for, well, I don't know, like 30 plus years. And
Fantastic.
and now, I mean, when the projects that I manage are pretty much, me and maybe my house and, things I need to get done. So it's
Those are big projects as well. Like, sometimes those
yeah,
are the bigger projects in our lives that need to be managed.
yes.
You are also an author, Bonnie. Tell us a little bit about the books that you've authored.
Yeah, well, actually, okay, I'll kind of do a
Oh,
funny thing because I have my laptop is actually sitting on one of my books. I know it's
oh,
backwards, but
fantastic.
um, yeah, I don't, but honestly, I don't, I've published about, I don't know, 34 books, but
Hmm.
I, I ended up writing like way too much. And so I'm completely burnt out. uh, yeah, and it's all I can do to, when I'm getting ready to update a course and
Yeah,
of course, with a newsletter and stuff like that. But yeah, I do have a book about Microsoft Project, um,
yeah,
but yeah, just don't do that as much.
yeah,
But
yeah.
still, I'm a good writer. I've always been a good
You
writer.
are you're a very good writer. You have a number of courses on LinkedIn Learning, so it's not just the project management foundations. You have topics on project management tools, and with taking users and practitioners around how to maximize tools around project management capability. And remind me how many courses you've got. It's a big number.
Well, I think some of them are archived, which means that you actually won't be able to find them unless you already have the link. But
Right.
I believe that I have about 60 active courses in the library.
That is absolutely
So
amazing, because of course you started with LinkedIn Learning before it was LinkedIn Learning. You started with
yeah,
lynda.com. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that,
Actually, I recorded my first course in 2009.
wow.
So it's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the one thing as far as like with the courses I have, I mean, I have a lot of courses on different aspects of Microsoft Project, but the three courses that I have for project management is Project Management Foundations, which is an introduction. It's a long introduction, but it's an introduction because some people say you didn't cover this, and it's like, yeah, well, the course is an hour longer than LinkedIn wanted it to be, so I can't cover everything. But then I have a course on schedules, like building schedules.
yeah,
So I think
fantastic.
that is called Project Management Foundations schedules. And then I have one on managing small projects because I've actually managed a lot of small projects over the years, and they're, they're kind of a special animal because
Mm,
you can't put a big methodology on a small project.
yes.
So,
Yeah,
so
very
I felt
true.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So perfect. If you listeners haven't had the opportunity to go and check out some of Bonnie's LinkedIn learning courses, I urge you to do so. On the other hand, is I suppose the change management side, where my passion and expertise lies. So I've got a number of LinkedIn learning courses on change management. And funny, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I fell into the change space because it's a similar story to yours, Bonnie. I was actually studying in university to become I studied computer systems engineering. So I wanted to be an engineer and I wanted to code and do, the stuff that engineers do. And then through my work experience that I was doing through uni, I started working in a project, and it was an SAP implementation project, funnily enough, um, and really, really enjoyed it. Then I got certified to be a project manager. And then I found out that I actually really enjoy the interactions with people and the people impacts and managing those. And then I kind of fell into the change management space. And that has been, part of who I am. It's been part of my narrative. And for years. And I've been lucky enough to, start my career in the UK, move through Asia, and then finally come to Australia where I'm now settled in. So, today we wanted to talk about this collaboration between project management and change management. I think before we dive into the topic too deep, we wanted to set some of the boundaries around it, I suppose, and to talk a little bit about definitions, because I think sometimes people mention concepts and things, but it's important that we're all on the same page in terms of definitions. So I know that in the project space, there's change management, and there's also something called change control. And that was part of how I fell into the space. I started learning about change control initially, and I was like, oh, this is not quite the area I wanted to really get involved in. But change management or change control within the project management space, I suppose, is all about managing changes that happen to requirements, for example, or to technical details, or to software, or to scope, you know. Um, and there is a set process. We need to make sure that the change is well defined. We need to make sure that the change, there's a body of advisors that reviews the change, that discusses how the change will impact the course of the project. And when that happens, the change is approved, and then we can go ahead and communicate, implement it, whatever that happens. Bonnie, I'll give you a moment here to maybe expand on that and tell us from your perspective how that's been handled.
Yeah, well, with the change control, the idea is that you come up with your plan in the beginning, and when the plan, and this is true whether it's a traditional or agile project. I mean,
Mm,
there's always planning, no matter what. Um, once your plan is approved, that's the point at which you decide what are you going to keep in your baseline for the project, and then the changes come from changes to that saved baseline. So yeah, with the change that goes on in a project, that is basically about managing and controlling any changes that come after the project was approved to proceed. The thing that I love about this kind of overlap of project management and change management is, I mean, it's a natural fit, because the whole point of projects is you're doing a project to change something. So by definition, that project is driving the organizational change management, within an organization.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so there is a natural link between the two. But yeah, a lot of people get confused because a lot of us do call the change control within a project. We will call that change management. It's just so it's not organizational change management. It's just the
Yeah.
changes within the project.
And where we want to focus today is mainly in the organizational change management space. So we want to talk about people, and
Mhm.
we want to talk about that intersection between, if you have two different roles on a project, one being the change manager and one being the project manager, how do these two different roles collaborate for better results? So in the organizational change management space, of course, it's all about managing the impacts to people. So whenever a project gets initiated and scoped and planned, um, where, I suppose for me, the most interesting space is how does that impact the people, whether that's employees, whether that's
Mhm.
different stakeholders, whether that's, customers. What is that impact going to be, and how are we going to manage it effectively and with as little disturbance as possible? Um, so, there have been projects where you get an opportunity to be both roles at once. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But when you have two different roles, so you have a project manager, a well defined project manager who's a different person, and a change manager who's, a different role. There are some touch points between the two roles. There's a lot of stakeholder engagement, I suppose, and sometimes the stakeholders are the same people. So, for example, if the project manager has to do an update on how the project has been going to a particular department in an organization, and then the change manager has to go and engage those people and tell them, what the impacts are going to be, communicate to them about timelines, communicate to them about potential training and upskilling. And I wanted to talk to you, Bonnie, about what is the best way to maximize and to make it more efficient. The two, I suppose, um, aspects that we're absolutely lacking in at the moment is time and attention. And a lot of the
Mm.
times, those requests come in where the project manager and the change manager will require both time and attention from people. What are
Yeah.
some of the best ways that we can streamline those requests?
Well, so what's interesting is a while back I had done office hours with Angela Wick, and so we were
Mm,
talking about business analysis and project management, and the fact that if you have two people, doing those roles, it's the same thing. You need to get in front of the same people, and one of the things we talked about there, that you can use the same technique
mm,
between change and project management is, basically go into it and, have those two people really truly, like we're talking about here, collaborating, so that when
mm.
you do need that time and attention, if it makes sense, do the meetings together, if you can. I mean, sometimes the topics are not going to be the same, and you'd have to do it separately. But yeah, I think that if there are those opportunities to, like,
Mm.
not make people go into more meetings than they have to. Um, yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
meetings are just such a, they just consume time and energy, and it's,
Yeah.
um,
And in most cases, you on the project, you may have a project plan and you may have a change plan, and they kind of tend to be two separate documents. Now, where I've seen it work really well is where these are almost merged together. So the change plan becomes like a subset of the project plan. So the project manager has really clear visibility of what engagements are going forward, who would the change manager engage in the next coming time frames, and then you collaborate and you work together almost hand in hand. I see both roles working almost, attached to the hip. So the change manager can shape the narrative around some of the project manager meetings, and vice versa. So they both have touch points with stakeholders, in some cases different stakeholders, but most of the time they're very similar stakeholders. Now, the project management message is slightly different. It's about how we're tracking, what are some of the risks and issues that we're encountering, and how we can manage those going forward. The change manager is more building the awareness and understanding, and then the acceptance of the change with the general pool of stakeholders. But when we're talking about especially in the early stages of the project, when things are starting to get off the ground and we're starting to engage all the stakeholders, there's so much collaboration that can happen in that space. And that, if we keep the two plans tallied together, and kind of, almost like a subset of each other, I think there's a lot of benefits that can be realized through that exercise.
Yeah, the great thing about, and again, this, like, going back to the project managers and business analysts, the great thing about having a project manager and a change manager working together is you you know you always have, like, too much to do. And so the idea of, like, having someone else, it's like you don't have to do everything yourself. If you collaborate with the other person, it just means that there's more of a chance that you're going to be able to get the things done that you have to get done. Um, but the one point I'm going to raise is, of course, we've probably all run into the people, like, if you have, people with rather large and delicate egos,
Mm.
that can be a challenge, because they don't want to share, because they somehow think that unless they do everything themselves and get all the attention, that somehow that takes away, from their power. And I'm just going to put the pitch in here, because it's like, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's like I have always been willing to share, like, whether it's sharing knowledge or like collaborating with people. It's just like, the results are so much better if you actually play nicely with other people. The whole power trip things just do not work. It's not good for
Yeah.
anybody. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that I think it's great to have that collaboration going.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think sometimes those, power plays come from the stakeholders as well. And if the project manager and the change manager work together and collaborate, like, the change manager can shade light around those personality traits as well, because, part of change management is to analyze who the stakeholders are, and, what's their impact,
Right.
and what is their so where do they sit in the company. So giving that perspective, I think, to the project manager, and then making sure that whatever the message is, it's in a nice narrative tailored to that particular audience. That definitely will bring some some positive outcomes. But yeah, I completely agree.
Yes.
And like, sometimes when we work within the same project team, there are those power plays as well. It's not necessarily helpful, but getting a better understanding of that. Some of the change management techniques can help with that, even if you're a project manager and you're sort of doing both roles at once, right?
Yeah.
We have a question from Michelle. Sorry, Bonnie, did you want to
Yeah, go for it.
mention something before?
No, actually, that's what I was going to mention that.
So Michelle is asking, should a change manager have their role defined like other team members in a RACI? I'm happy to give my comment on this, and then I'll hand over to Bonnie. Most definitely, yes, Michelle. Most definitely. So I think all of the roles should be well defined in the RACI, and what that gives you is that clarity of responsibilities and clarity of, oh, but you were supposed to do that communication. Was that your stakeholder or was that my stakeholder? Am I giving the update to the board or are you giving the update to the board? And when projects get underway, time seems to speed up so much. And, we're all trying to do everything really quickly, really efficiently, but there are some miscommunications along the way. And, our mailboxes seem to get completely out of control. There's so many requests on time and attention. And if you have a really well-defined RACI, so that's RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And if you can have all of that, that's a matrix that you do at the start of a project or during the course of a project. And if you can have all of the project roles defined within that RACI, that just makes things a lot easier. Bonnie, let me give the space for you.
The other thing too is, and I mean, I agree with you, it's like everyone involved in a project, they should be on that chart. And, but the thing about, like having those responsibilities and roles within the project, that also informs your communication plan. So, if the people who are informed versus consulted, and they might be informed, but what are they being informed on? So you can, by making sure that everyone who touches that project has been included in that, it means that, in your communication plan, you're not going to be overwhelming, certain stakeholders with information that they don't care about, because when you send them something that they need to care about, you want them to actually pay attention.
Yes. So. Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. And yeah, going back to the communication plan, great point. I think sometimes we structure the communication plans, and one of the things I love about change deliverables or change documents as we're going through the project is that they should remain live documents. So these documents are always updated and added to. If you have that information coming from the RACI matrix, who needs to be informed of what. Similar, I think most, if a new stakeholder pops up, you need to put that in the communication plan and make sure that they're included in the RACI as well, because as we're going through the project, things evolve, changes come, whether that's a change control type change or organizational type change, to the scope, to the timeline. So as we're going through, make sure that you're constantly reviewing those particulars, the communication plan, your stakeholder analysis, your change plan, so that when you're going through and something happens that you haven't anticipated, or a new stakeholder pops up, or there's a change to scope or timeline, that you can anticipate how that's going to play further down the line, and make sure that all of the stakeholders, because let's face it, organizational change management is all about tailored towards the stakeholders and towards the group of people that are going to be impacted by that change. ensuring that they're informed, that they get awareness, and that they get the right capabilities to manage that change when the change becomes operational and becomes a new way of working. Excellent. Thank you, Michelle, for that question.
The other thing, you know, actually, she asked a follow-up about the other artifacts. And I don't know that it's necessarily, you know, that these are artifacts that the change manager produces, but certainly the artifacts that a change manager is involved in. Another one is the risk management plan. Because, you know, part of organizational change also introduces risks. So that's another one that you have to keep your eye on, and that the change manager and project manager collaborate on.
Yeah, for sure. One of the big artifacts that underpins the organizational change management activities is the change impact assessment. And that is an assessment that is done, you know, understanding what are the different changes, whether you're changing processes, whether you're changing culture, whether a new technology is being introduced into the company or organization, enterprise, and then mapping out how that impacts the different stakeholder groups, and then mapping out what are the different interventions that a change manager, project manager, or the project team will do to make sure that the population, the pool of people that are impacted by that, they can manage the changes effectively. As part of that change impact assessment, there are risks and issues also that are captured and that have to be surfaced into the main risk and issue register that a project manager would safeguard. And again, hence the really important collaboration between the two roles to make sure that everything surfaces. And if we uncover any issues or risks, that those are tracked, that those are discussed and managed effectively. A lot of the times, change manager has conversations with stakeholders, and in my experience, these would pop in a conversation. Oh, I didn't realize we were doing blah 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 blah, and how come? And this is actually a risk for my business unit. You go, oh, but that's not captured anyway. Perhaps it's a good idea to capture that somewhere. So, hence the importance of, you know, keeping those documents alive. Reviewing them very regularly with your stakeholders. You know, if there's anything that you catch in a conversation with your stakeholders, please make sure you pop it down in one of those, and then surface that with your project manager. Excellent. Now, maybe we can talk a little bit when we have the two roles done by one person. that changes the dynamic a little bit and makes things even more interesting. I've had a number of projects that has been the case. And I guess from my perspective, Bonnie, it makes things a little bit challenging because, you know, both roles require quite a bit of dedication and quite a bit of focus, but on different parts of the project. And from a change manager perspective, you know, my attention has always been on the people, but when the attention has to focus on the plan or on the overall scope, then it's a bit of a game of, you know, who's got the loudest voice, I suppose, and where does your attention have to go first? What has been, you know, a good way of managing that when you have the two roles done by one person?
Well, you know, so to me, like when I've managed projects, I feel like it's always about the people as well. Even as a project manager, it's still about the people, and whether the people are your project team or the end users, the customers, the intermediate stakeholders. It's, yes, there is a technical aspect to managing a project, but honestly, I think most of the time is on the people. So if you're a project manager who tends to focus on the people, then even though they are two demanding roles, I think it's a little bit easier to do it because you tend to lean in that direction anyway. Because to me, my philosophy is, if you want that to be successful, uh, it's more than a win-win. It's actually like a win-win-win. You've got customers, organization, and employees, and like those, they all have to win for a project to be successful. So if you have that outlook, then I think it's not so hard. Um,
Yeah.
if you tend to be I think if you tend to be a project manager who tends to dive into the tools more, like, let's say you're a schedule nerd, which, nothing wrong with that, because I'm a schedule nerd. But then I think you might actually not pay as much attention to that organizational change management as you should.
Yes.
And I would say in that case, it's almost like somehow you kind of have to have a reminder somewhere, and maybe it's something that comes up once a week in your calendar to remind you, you have to check on these things before they get a life of their own.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. In one of my projects, is a real life story. I had a very similar situation. Our project manager, we were doing an agile implementation, and our project manager was very focused on the cadence of all the different events in an agile implementation, and whether everything was recorded. And, we had a sort of, we were focusing more on artifacts rather than on managing people and understanding whether people actually had a similar outcome in mind, and trying to align those high level stakeholders to make sure that we can tick on the right boxes. So what happened in the end is that particular person had a lot of coaching, and luckily one of our high level stakeholders sort of saw that was a gap. And granted to him, to the project manager, he was an excellent project manager. So he didn't let anything drop from the project management space, but he just needed that bit of coaching on, how to make sure that the stakeholders are being looked after.
Yeah.
So I think
it's like you're talking about, just because projects are about people, and people are messy. People are just messy. And so you have to, you just, so you'll have situations like that where, someone has a weak spot. That doesn't make them bad. It just means, there's an opportunity to build skills, right? So,
yes.
yeah.
And I like that really positive spin that you did. Like we continue to build skills, whether it's something that we've known for years, or whether it's something completely new to us. And as soon as there's a new project on the horizon, I think it's an opportunity to build skills, to be exposed to different stakeholder groups, to work with a new team, to work in a way that you haven't worked on before. So I love that. And I'd like to encourage that from all of our listeners and people that are listening to this, if it's a recorded session. Always have that open mind towards learning new things and towards being open to constructive feedback. Because in a project, there's, we're doing things where we're making changes to improve, whether that's the organizational landscape, the technological landscape, the culture of an organization. And if we can improve along the way, that's a win-win for everyone, right? We're getting new skills and new capabilities. Now, if you are listening to this, and this is the recorded version of this broadcast, I just wanted to say to our listeners, please make sure you pop in your questions in the chat box, and myself and Bonnie will try to answer those after the event. So don't be discouraged that you have missed the event. Please still, if anything pops into your head, pop it into the chat, and we'll come back to you. With regards to questions, we've just got one question coming up as well. Let's see. We've got a question that says, what activities will the change manager and project manager play in the deployment, implement, at the change stage of the project? Bonnie, what do you think?
Well, I think that's another. It's another place where the two roles will collaborate for sure. And I think that, but I also think that the change manager. How do I want to say this? Actually, if the change manager and the project manager have both been doing their jobs, like, and like working past all the obstacles, because there are going to be obstacles. So sometimes you don't have a choice. But anyway, if you get to that point, hopefully it's going to be going smoothly. So it's not like either one of those has to somehow jump in and do something, because it would be, well, we're going to deploy and implement this change in the organization. And if you've been dealing with those people, can you still, okay.
Yes,
I'm
yeah, we
starting
can
to kind of go in and out. So,
cut out.
but
We
anyway,
can hear.
okay. I would say that the main thing that might happen is when you get into that actual implementation stage, that there could be, that could be a place where previously unidentified misunderstandings could come up. Or you could end up with a stakeholder who, despite the fact that you've been running stuff past them, they may say, well, I didn't think we were doing that. So
No, that never happens. Yes.
So I kind of think that it's, it's just a continuation of what you've been doing all along, of, moving the people toward being comfortable about this change that is being implemented.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, the deployment / implementation is probably going towards the pinnacle of the change. So, oh my goodness, we're going to go live, or we're going to make this happen. We're going to be starting to work in a different way. So ensuring that the people are prepared for that kind of destination. So if you imagine the change management journey as a bit of a bridge, we start from, this is how we do things today, and then there's a bit of a transition period where our bridge is, and then we have on the other side, this is how we're going to do things in a new way. And as we're going through the bridge, the change manager and the project manager will work together to move the people along the bridge, right? To help them transition from the old way of working to the new way of working. And in the implementation stage, we're kind of getting quite close to the end of the bridge where, okay, there's probably a few more steps to the other side now. And I think it's making sure that we have the skills and capabilities in the people that are impacted, whether that's internal, external, shareholders, whatever that is. But do they have the understanding of what's going to change? Do they know how it's going to impact them personally, whether that's impacting my job or it's impacting my business unit or it's impacting my organization? And then, do I need to do things in a different way? So have I had the training or upskill or the communications that tell me that I might need to click in a different box, or I might need to do this in a different process, following a different steps to get the thing done that I need to get done? Simple example is if we're, for example, changing how we're producing reports in a company, come the implementation stage of new reports, do the people know how to produce those reports? Do they know what software to use? Do they know the steps within the software to produce those reports? And do they know, once they produce the report, how to export it, how to analyze it, how to do all of these things? So that's hopefully answers the question around the activities for the project manager and the change manager. Oh, and I just wanted to say, and both roles need to be involved in that exercise, that final exercise of making sure people are upskilled, they're trained, they're aware of all of that. So towards the end, like, the change management activities come very prominent, right? We have to set communications out. We have to make sure people are trained. We have to make sure that we're managing those impacts or those conversations with high-level stakeholders. So perhaps it starts, with planning. It starts with let's figure out who is who in the organizational landscape from a project management perspective. And towards the end, there's a big push of making sure that people are really coming towards the end of the bridge.
Yeah, I think that's one of my big complaints, just like with software companies, is the fact that it's like they don't really involve the end users as much as, like, I think they should. So you get to that implementation part where, especially with online software. And in fact, one of my examples was I was in the middle of recording a LinkedIn learning course on a tool, and at, I don't know, like 2 p.m., and I had recorded a bunch of movies, and at 2 p.m., like, or maybe when I came back from lunch, the interface was completely different.
The tool changed.
The whole thing changed. It was, and it was
Yeah.
online software. And so, first of all, like, it was like I had no idea, like, where to even get to some of the stuff that was happening. And it also meant that everything I had recorded that morning, like, I was going to have to redo. And, it's kind of like, you know, when people are on deadlines, like, they really, they can't afford to have everything in a tool change.
Yeah. That's a good point you raise about deadlines. So I think sometimes when organizations want to go through a project or through a change, it's really important to plan those within the set boundaries of the organizational landscape. So what is it that we do? Are we a financial organization? If so, we probably don't want to plan stuff around the end of the financial year, because that's a really busy time. And like you say, if we need to train users on new tools for them to be able to do their job for the end of the financial year, we really don't want to be getting close to that end of the financial year, because it's going to be stressful. People not really take as much on board. So I think that is a really good point. Now, perhaps planning is a core block for both aspects of the coin, for project management and change management, because um, the plan, I suppose, is the backbone for both initiatives, right? And
Yeah.
whenever I speak to my executives or to my clients, they go, where is the change plan? We want to see the change plan. And I'm sure it's similar with, the project manager side. Where is your project management plan? We want to see it. Is everything recorded in? Yes, it's very important. Planning is very important. But what happens when, sometimes we've planned and things happen and we need to replan? I mean, that happens quite a lot, right? It happens at least once in the projects that I've been involved. I'm sure with your level of experience, it's happened more than once on a number of projects. Um, how do you see that? Like, what is the most effective way of going through that exercise? And how could the two roles collaborate together to make it less painful?
Well, first of all, one of the things, the quotes that I like to include in, I've definitely included in my books. I think it was Winston Churchill who said that, the plan never survives, the first, uh, uh, I can't remember the word, but like the first interaction with the enemy, basically. And so, or it's like, the plan doesn't, the plan doesn't survive, the its first meeting with reality. Um, so, a plan, and it's kind of like with my books, like when I would always like set up an outline for a book, and but then when I started writing, I got into it. Then I realized, oh, it needs to be organized differently or whatever. So the outline didn't stay just because I planned it that way.
Yeah.
So the plan is going to change.
Mm.
And I think that that's an ongoing thing. But I think what you're talking about is significant changes to a project. And when you hit one of those where there is just like this significant change to a project, honestly, it really, the best thing to do is, first of all, take a couple deep breaths, get yourself centered, and then two, you basically go back and you kind of do what you did the first time. But
Yeah.
now you already have a plan. So with the replanning, it's like, oh, it's no different. You're just making changes to your original plan. So
Mm.
you go back to the change manager and project manager collaborating
Yeah.
all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of the time when you talk to professionals who have been in the project space, that's kind of part of life. Oh, we've got the plan. That's the first version of the plan. So we know that there will be changes. We know that there will be different things we need to move, and you need to adjust it as you go along, and that's fine. I think from a business stakeholders point of view, perhaps they don't anticipate those changes, so I think communicating those changes to a broader audience, sometimes you get, "Well, why is that changing, and we didn't expect it to change." And I think managing those expectations and setting out that, projects are messy as well. It's a bit like change is messy. It will move and it will reshape, and the end result, we're still aiming for the end result, but how we get there, it could be by a different path, or it could be that along the way we had to change something because something unexpected happened, or we didn't anticipate that this particular pool of users wouldn't be ready, and we need to change to a different pool of users or to a different software or whatever it may be. So I think setting expectations with stakeholders that things will move and they will morph and they will still get to the same outcome, but maybe, the journey there won't be as clear cut as what people expect it to be. I think that's a good point for people to have at the back of their mind. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. It would make our lives easier. That's for sure.
Yeah, and similar with executives. I mean, whenever executives go, oh, but we haven't reviewed the plan and it was such and such 2 weeks ago, and now suddenly you're presenting this and you're telling me we're not going to get to this. I think.
Yeah, but I've also had the reverse experience where the executives like never wanted to look at the plan and would just kind of come in with like some like harebrained idea, and it's like, well, let's do this. And it's like, we need to chat. It's like, you know, okay, so if we do this, are you okay with the project being 3 months later? Or if we do this, are you okay with the budget going up by, $100,000? It's like, we can do these things, but there are consequences.
Yeah.
So, um,
And it's a good point, because if there are consequences to, the timeline, or to, impacting different pool of people, then it's a good place for the change manager to get involved, or for good time to review all of those change management artifacts and to go, okay, so let's figure out it. Is there a change in the impact? Is there a change in our stakeholder pool? Is there a change to the timeline? And what does that mean in terms of stakeholders? And not only for change manager, but, for the project manager to be kind of in the details of those different assessments.
yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. If you guys are dialing in and have any questions for me and Bonnie, please pop them in the chat window below, and we'll answer those. Now, what we wanted to mention is a little idea that Bonnie and I are working on. And hopefully you guys will be interested, because we're doing this for you, the LinkedIn user community. But we are thinking of having similar discussions like this, but rather than having just two LinkedIn learning experts, we are putting together a panel discussion. And hopefully our first panel discussion will be coming to you in late June, early July. We're still working on the dates. And we're really excited, because that will give you guys direct access to ask questions, not of just 2 LinkedIn learning instructors, but potentially 4 to 5 LinkedIn learning instructors. And the idea for those sessions is that it's a very interactive, it's sort of like a panel fireside chat. And the audience is as much part of the discussion as the LinkedIn learning instructors are. So stay tuned. This will come, and Bonnie and myself will be involved in this first panel that's coming towards the end of June, early July. And we've got 2 very exciting LinkedIn learning instructors who will be joining us. So hopefully there'll be 4 or 5 of us in that first panel. Anyway, more on that to come in the next few weeks. And now we've just got another question from Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, for putting another question in the chat. Question for Christina. What is the most difficult change you've managed, and how did you approach it? Oh, thank you for that question, Michelle. Let me have a think about the most difficult. I think every project has got its challenges and it's got its different positives, I suppose. And if you approach it as a learning experience, and for yourself as much as for the organization, I think that's the best way. The most challenging has probably been projects where the culture of an organization needs to shift. And that's because culture is so ingrained into how we do things every day. Like if you think about, even changing your bank, for example, that is quite a difficult thing to do on an individual level. But if you had to do that for a pool of people and convince them that it's really good for them to change their banks, I mean, how many of us change our bank on a yearly level, on a yearly recurrence? Not many, right? And we can get better interest rates, we can get better service, we can get better products, but we're just set in our ways, and it's all about habits. And culture is very similar in an organization. So we know how to do things, we know who to approach, we know how things are being done around here. And changing those things takes quite a bit of time. And whenever a project is set out, I suppose the challenge is that the project has a start date and an end date. But when you're changing culturally in an organization, it can't quite have an end date, right? It's a continuum. So the challenge is, one, to convince executives and high level stakeholders that that change effort needs to continue and needs to be continually monitored, and then become almost part of how they do things. So it's a much larger scope of work, and it needs to be, I suppose, planned for a longer time frames, and not necessarily have an end date in mind. So yes, that would be my sort of take on the most difficult changes. But maybe I'll throw it to Bonnie for this one, and just give us a quick finish off on the most challenging change.
So I was working on a big project, but I was representing one of the vendors into that project. And so we were a small company, one of the vendors in a big company. And it was like telephone stuff. And they were basically changing how the field technicians were going to do their jobs. And the challenge was the field technicians, like, as a group, like, did not want to change the
Yeah.
way they were actively trying to torpedo the project. It was very hard. And finally, I mean, they would do things like we'd have a call every day at 3 to go over progress and status. And they would spend the hour before that meeting putting as many bugs into our bug reporting system as they could.
Trying to sabotage. Yeah.
And so from 2 to 3 every day, I would basically be sitting there, like, watching the bugs come in, and I would research them and figure out that they were not valid. And
Yeah.
anyway, so as far as approaching it, it finally, there was like one day, and this was, I'm not saying I would recommend this approach, but there was this one day when I just finally had enough. And I got on the call and I was like, all right, look, you guys, it's just like, this is ridiculous. These games, it's like every day I waste an hour, going through evaluating bugs that are not bugs. And, it's just like, we all have to work together. But I just kind of like yelled at everybody. And interestingly enough, that actually kind of worked. I mean, I don't know that the techs fully came around, but it got the executives' attention. And then they actually started working on the change management as well. So
Yeah. I think that's got a lot to add. Like, if you have challenging stakeholders, it makes things a lot more difficult for everyone. But, at the end of the day, some of those challenging stakeholders can turn into your best advocates for change. So just go on with that open mind and with, positive attitude, and, I think be straightforward, like Bonnie was just sharing with us. And I think people will understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, I think we're at the top of the hour. We're actually 5 minutes after the top of the hour. So thank you all for all of your questions. Really glad that you were able to spend your time here with us. Once again, if you're watching this as a recorded version, please make sure you pop in any comments or questions in the chat box, and we'll come back to you. I'd like to thank Bonnie today for being my guest. Thank you so much for your time, Bonnie. Once again, if you haven't had a chance to check out Bonnie's LinkedIn Learning courses on project management, please do. They're absolutely awesome, and they are regarded as the top courses on LinkedIn Learning. So please go and check out those. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks for inviting me. This was really fun, and thanks for everybody for joining us. Looking forward to, maybe next month.
Next month, I think. Stay tuned for our panel discussions. Yep. That will be awesome. Great. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.